Welcome to the Marketing Behind Rapid Growth, the podcast where we explore the strategies, decisions, and growth engines behind some of the world's most successful technology companies. Today, we're talking about ActiveCampaign. Here's a strange fact to start with. Most billion-dollar software companies have an origin story involving a garage, a dorm room, or a hoodie-clad founder pitching investors on a napkin. ActiveCampaign's origin story involves a car being sold to buy a computer. No venture capital, no viral launch, no hockey stick chart in year one. Just a fine art student in Chicago, a stack of client work, and a decision to package what he'd already built and sell it for around $35. What follows is not a story of overnight disruption. It's a story of 13 years of grinding, one radical pivot, and a marketing strategy that only worked once the company stopped trying to be someone else. Stick with us, because the lessons here are cut against almost everything the modern growth playbook tells you to do. Let's start with the slow years. In 2003, Jason Vanderboom needed cash. He'd moved to Chicago to study fine arts, and to pay the bills, he was consulting for small businesses, building them custom email tools. Somewhere along the way, he noticed something every consultant eventually notices. He kept solving the same problem over and over for different clients. So he did what a lot of technical founders do. He packaged the solution into a product. He listed it in a few online directories. And he charged a one-time fee of about $35. For the next 10 years, nothing dramatic happened. There was no explosive growth, no press cycle, just Vanderboom and a small team, maybe 8 people, building a sprawling set of tools, help desks, survey software, whatever they themselves needed to run the business. Revenue sat in the low millions. Respectable, unremarkable. Today, that same company serves more than 180,000 customers, generates north of $250 million in revenue, and at its 2021 peak was valued at $3 billion. So what happened in between? 3 things, really. A product pivot, a precise read on an underserved market, and a marketing philosophy that eventually threw out the industry playbook entirely. Let's talk about the market first, because this is where the real insight begins. By the early 2000s, marketing software had split into 2 camps. On one side, cheap, simple newsletter tools, good for blasting out an email, not much else. On the other, sprawling enterprise platforms, expensive and complex, built for companies with dedicated marketing operations teams. And stuck in the middle were small and mid-sized businesses. They wanted something more sophisticated than a newsletter. They wanted to recreate that feeling of a local shopkeeper who remembers your name, but online, at scale. What they didn't have was an IT department to run complicated on-premise software or the headcount to operate enterprise-grade workflows. Vanderboom saw this gap clearly, and here's the strategic insight worth sitting with. He didn't define the opportunity as send more email. He defined it as orchestrating the entire customer relationship, marketing, sales, and CRM woven together, but simple enough for a 5-person team to actually use. That reframing is the difference between building a feature and building a category, but seeing the opportunity and acting on it are 2 different things. And this is where ActiveCampaign's story gets uncomfortable. For years, the business model actively worked against the vision. Customers paid once. They downloaded the software. Then they had to install it themselves on their own servers. Revenue was lumpy. A great sales month followed by a flat one. There was no compounding, no recurring engine. The obvious fix, in hindsight, was subscription software. Simple SaaS. Recurring revenue, delivered in the cloud, no installation required. But Vanderboom didn't make that move quickly, and when he finally did, the bet was almost reckless in its scope. He didn't just add a subscription tier alongside the old model. He sunset 7 of his 8 products. He collapsed the entire business down to one unified automation platform, priced at just $9 a month. Think about what that actually meant. He was cannibalizing his own existing revenue. He was asking loyal customers, people who'd specifically chosen a one-time purchase because they didn't want a subscription, to trust him through a total model change. Why did it take so long to pull that trigger? Vanderboom has since been candid about it. It wasn't fear of failure that held him back. It was something closer to fear of success. Years spent quietly over-engineering every what-if about scale, worrying about what might break if the bet actually worked. That's a subtle but important distinction for any founder listening. Paralysis doesn't always look like doubt. Sometimes it looks like excessive preparation for a future that hasn't arrived yet. When he finally committed, the friction of installation disappeared, recurring revenue started compounding, and growth accelerated sharply. The lesson practically writes itself. The market, not internal anxiety, should be the one deciding what needs to scale. Now, a strong pivot only buys you so much time. The product still had to keep evolving with how small businesses actually worked, and that meant meeting customers on new channels. In 2025, ActiveCampaign acquired Hylos, a company based in Mexico City, to bring native WhatsApp messaging into the platform, alongside two-way SMS in a unified inbox. Practical, incremental, exactly what you'd expect from a company tracking its customers' habits. But the more interesting shift wasn't about channels. It was philosophical. It was the move from automation to autonomy. Traditional marketing automation is powerful, but it's technical. You build logic trees. If a shopper abandons their cart, wait 2 hours, then send this specific email. It works, but assembling those flows eats time. And time is the one resource small businesses never have enough of. So in 2025, ActiveCampaign launched something called Active Intelligence. Instead of manually building each step of a workflow, a marketer could simply state a goal in plain language. Create a welcome series for new customers. And AI agents would assemble, adapt, and optimize the campaign across channels on their own. The strategic bet here is worth naming explicitly. ActiveCampaign wasn't just adding an AI feature because AI was trendy. It was targeting the SMB's single scarcest resource, time, and trying to give small teams something enterprise companies already had, the ability to think about strategy instead of drowning in mechanics. Now let's turn to marketing itself, because this is where ActiveCampaign's story becomes genuinely instructive, not just for SaaS founders, but for anyone building a growth function. In the mid-2000s, leadership watched companies like HubSpot rewrite the rules of B2B marketing. Content machines, keyword-driven blogs, enterprise-heavy sales motions, and did what a lot of companies do when they see someone winning. They copied it. It didn't work. The approach sat awkwardly against ActiveCampaign's engineering-driven culture and its very specific, very practical SMB audience. Borrowed strategy, it turns out, doesn't automatically transfer just because it worked somewhere else. Momentum only returned once the team stopped imitating competitors and turned inward toward its own community. Under growth marketers, including Casey Hill, ActiveCampaign made a bet that in a noisy, crowded market, peer trust would beat Polish every time. That bet crystallized into 3 specific moves. First, they rethought LinkedIn. As interruptive B2B display advertising delivered diminishing returns, the company mobilized its own employees, dozens of them, to post organic, genuinely useful commentary about marketing automation. Not product pitches, real industry perspective. The best performing posts were then amplified with paid promotion behind them. Educational content, not sales collateral, drove engagement well above typical B2B benchmarks, and it did so at a positive return on spend. Second, they leaned into the voice of the customer. A large share of ActiveCampaign's growth was coming from users switching off legacy competitors, so the team asked its most enthusiastic customers to publicly share their migration stories. They didn't pay for this advocacy. Instead, they used reciprocity, amplifying and engaging with those customers' content in return. The result was organic social proof, feeding directly into the pipeline. Third, they got disciplined about influence and earned media. Rather than paying for vanity metrics, influencer deals were tied to outcomes. Part of the fee up front, the rest only released once tracked acquisition targets were actually hit. At the same time, the company aggressively pursued earned media, putting its people on dozens of niche e-commerce and SaaS podcasts, reaching very specific audiences with genuine storytelling instead of broad-spectrum advertising. And through marketing mix modeling, ActiveCampaign was able to show something a lot of growth teams struggle to prove, that this community-led approach was actually moving the bottom line. Marketing wasn't a cost center bolted onto the product. It was a driver of the product's compounding growth. So what does all of this add up to? Obsess over customers, not competitors. Vondaboom has talked about starting and ending each day looking at cancellation reasons and NPS scores, fixating on real customer pain rather than chasing feature parity with rivals tends to produce software that actually solves problems. Bootstrapping buys control. ActiveCampaign self-funded for 13 years before taking a $20 million round in 2016. And even then, the founder has said that capital was mostly for balance sheet security and outside accountability, not growth fuel. That independence gave the company room to make long-term customer-first calls, like continuing to support legacy on-premise users well after the SaaS pivot, decisions an impatient board might never have allowed. Beware the fear of success. Overplanning for scale can be just as paralyzing as fear of failure. Vanderboom's own hesitation likely cost the company years of compounding growth. Sometimes the healthiest move is to ship and let the market tell you what needs to scale, and marketing has to fit your DNA. Borrowed playbooks rarely transfer cleanly. ActiveCampaign only found traction once its marketing tactics matched its product's actual value. A tool built to foster authentic customer relationships, sold through authentic, community-driven marketing. ActiveCampaign's journey from a $35 download to a multi-billion-dollar automation platform isn't a story of sudden disruption. It's a story of patience, deep domain knowledge, a tolerance for the slow compounding of recurring revenue, and the nerve to retire profitable products in service of a bigger vision. Pair that with a marketing engine built on the company's own community, and you get more than a company that entered a market. You get a company that learned to orchestrate one. This was the marketing behind rapid growth. See you in the next episode.